Welcome to the Great British Crochet Off Technical Edition, where I'll be chatting through how I put together this week's Great British Crochet Off project. If you missed this week's episode of the Great British Crochet Off, a series where I crochet something inspired by an episode of the Great British Bake Off that I watch, you can click this link right up here and watch this week's episode. But now let's chat about this week's crochet bake, and I'll talk through all the different stitches I used, all the different tools and pieces that I used to put this together in case you're just curious about my process or you want to make something like this for yourself. And this week's crochet bake was this tiered Black Forest cake, like kids baking kit. So all of these tiers are separate, so a kid could like pretend to bake it and frost it and build up their cake themselves. When I'm starting one of these projects, I look at the most basic shape of it and I plan on doing those parts. So I looked at the fact that there was layers of cake and layers of whipped cream, and then I start with that, and then if I have time, if it needs it, that's where I add in more things like the cherries, the cherry on top, the sprinkles. So I start with like the most basic structure of it, and then I just layer on more parts of it. Let's start with the piping bag. So you should know something about the Great British Crochet Off, and that is it involves hot glue. Sometimes some of the bits that I put on are just too fiddly for me to want to attach with like sewing or crocheting it on, and so I use a lot of hot glue. I also make these things, a lot of them, to be like used by my kids and things like that, and I want it to be sturdy enough that they can play with them and I don't have to worry about them falling apart, so hence hot glue. I use this plastic embroidery carding for a lot of the like structural integrity items in my crocheting things. So that is what the tip of this piping bag is. So I just cut a piece of the plastic and then I separately crocheted a piece and then glued it over. I started to do it where I like actually sewed it on. I started to do it where I actually like used this stuff as it's intended, which is where you use a needle and a piece of yarn and you weave it through the grates. I didn't like the look of it, so I just used it as a little piece of structural integrity. And then this is just a chain of slightly thicker yarn that I glued in on the inside. And then there is a piece of cloth in here. So this piece is kind of wrapped around like this. The little piece of like whipped cream is glued in here. And then there's a cap of just like white cloth over the whole thing, so it can't go up inside the stuffing. And then this is basically just a triangle. I did this with half double crochets because I wanted to work it up a little bit quicker and I wasn't as worried about it being a tighter weave. This was glued onto here, and then this is the seam sewed at the edge. This is just filled with polyfill, and I just did a string around the top, and it is very secure. And then you have yourself a little piping bag. I use single crochet though in a lot of the things for my projects because especially when I'm doing like the toy items, I like a really tight weave. I used this 3.75 hook for I think almost all of this project. And then I used big twist yarn for all of the yarn on this project, except for the little bit of piped whipped cream at the end. What I did for the cakes was I just made a circle to the width that I wanted. This is 5 inches across, and then when I got to the width that I wanted, I started working on the back loop for a row, and that's how I get this nice neat turned edge. And I did 4 rows to be the sides, and this is just a separate circle at the exact same width that I sewed onto the one with the curve to it. It's stuffed with polyfill, but I was worried that it wasn't gonna lay flat enough that you could actually like stack the cakes, I could have used like quilter's batting, but I didn't want to waste my quilter's batting on this. So I just kind of took the lead from cushion making. And there are just a couple of little darts through here, if you can kind of see where it divots in, using the same colored yarn so that it would stay nice and flat so you could actually stack the cakes. For these whipped cream circles, I did the exact same thing where I made a circle that was 5 inches wide. I made 2 of them. I put a tiny bit of the polyfill on the inside and sewed them together. And then this is just the bobble stitch on the edge. I used the same technique when I did the milfoil coasters, and I really liked the way that it looked like dollops of whipped cream around the edge when you have these sandwiched together. The sprinkles on the top are just scraps from making the cakes that I pulled through with my little crochet hook and tied on the inside into a little knot, and they're super secure. They can't fall off, and they give you a little sprinkle effect. I find the bobble stitch is pretty useful when you're crocheting baked things. This is also the bobble stitch, just done in a circle, and you have like your little cherry filling, kind of like a cherry pie filling vibe. Speaking of cherry, this cake needed to have a cherry on top. So this is just a little crocheted ball, and then when I got to the top, I pulled the top string through really tightly and through the bottom, so you kind of got like a little bit of a not a perfect circle, but more of like a cherry shape. And then this is embroidery thread that I did in a single chain and tied at the top, so you have a cherry stem. A little white thread adds dimension to everything, kind of like a little catchlight that you do in an eye. And then it's just glued onto, I made this out of scrap yarn. This is just a little pom-pom that it's glued onto to give you a whipped cream effect. And as I said, my daughter said this needed to have love heart sprinkles, so I used this little heart pattern for so much. I used it for this, I've used it for my gingerbread house. I feel like I used this for another project really recently. And I will leave the crocheted heart pattern at the end. And again, all of this except for the like bobble stitch on the side is just single crochets. I like how nice and neat and tight that they leave a toy project like this. So it's really a pretty straightforward project to make. It's just making a lot of circles and sewing them together, just having the patience to do that. I have an idea for another version of this, so maybe if there's another cake challenge in the future that that inspires me to make another crochet cake toy, I will do that then, and that will be like a fully enrobed in frosting cake toy, but you'll have to stick around to see that one. So as a bonus, let's make a cute little crocheted heart, and I use these all the time for my projects. So you're just gonna make a magic loop or magic circle. You're going to chain 2, and then you're gonna do 2 double crochets. We're gonna do 2 half double crochets. You're going to do a double crochet, 2 half double crochets, and then 2 double crochets. Chain 2 and slip stitch into the magic ring. Pull it tight, and there you've got your little heart sprinkle. Perfect for attaching to bake-off projects or doll dresses or whatever else you want. I hope this was helpful. In the future, I can do some much more planned out ones where I actually like record along my process if anyone's interested, and let me know if you have any questions. Have a great day.